From development to reception, beginning to end, the story of Redemption Reapers is a tragic tale. Coming off the success of hit Metroidvania Lilies, Binary Haze Interactive and their sister company AdGlobe were looking to take another stab at the gaming industry. Much like my immense love for strategy RPGs, BHI loves to tell dark fantasy stories. For their second game, they somehow decided on mixing these two things, and well, it didn't go very well. So, why did Redemption Reapers fail? While there are many reasons for this, I can assure you it's not because the game itself is bad. I'd probably chalk it up to a mix of three main contributing factors, that being the price point, the receiving audience, and initial poor reviews. When it was announced that the game would be releasing at the steep price of 50 US doll hairs, it was met with backlash from online communities, with many stating the price to be too high. Considering this indie company were delving into a relatively niche genre with perhaps one of the most hard-to-please audiences, it was a shaky bet from the start. One that unfortunately did not pay off, with Redemption Reapers' very first review coming in at a harsh low 40. The reviews did slowly get better over time, but the damage had already been done. The highest this game could muster as far as a critic review was a 70, which is not bad, but considering the range of mostly negative review scores, it's fair to say that this game was cooked. A lot of reviews criticized the game for what they considered to be flat, generic-looking characters, an absence of a compelling story or narrative, and difficult gameplay with harsh punishment. Well, is all of this true? Let's dive straight in and see what all the fuss is about. I want to start off with gameplay because it makes the bulk of the experience. I played this game on normal, which is the hardest option available at the start. It provided a fairly decent challenge. The battle system starts off like a standard strategy RPG. Think like your classic Fire Emblem. You move your units across the grid employing skill and tactics in order to best your enemies. Turns happen in a player phase and enemy phase, which is standard. The very first thing I noticed about Redemption Reapers is that the margin for error is tight. What I mean by that is you have to be hyper aware of your character's positioning and the strength of enemies that you come upon. Your character's hit points are very low, and in the early chapters of the game, healing is extremely limited. I feel like this is the game's way of subtly encouraging the player to really think out their interactions with enemies. Health has to be treated like a resource because it's not a matter of if you'll be hit, but when and how hard. I was always looking at the stats of the enemies and calculating potential damage numbers, which is made easy by the game's simple stat system. This isn't an insult to the game either. I always appreciate it when strategy game keeps their numbers simple. It never actually takes away from the experience, but usually can rather enhance it. Seeing the enemy do 2 damage can be quite butt-clenching when your character has a health pool of 5. These tight margins and small health pools are balanced out by the follow-up attack system. Whenever one of your units attack an enemy, melee allies adjacent to the enemy can choose to follow-up attack. This is a step up from Triangle Strategy's follow-up system because you get to choose if you want your characters to do a follow-up attack, and along with that, they can do it from any angle. It's a good idea to position allies next to enemies without having them attack in order to preserve health and set up chain attacks. I will admit I had one hilarious fumble where I was eating a can of Sunchip Minis while playing and got my little monkey knuckle stuck in the can, forcing me to miss a follow-up attack timer. It put me in a shitty position, but I did recover. Redemption Reapers makes the bold choice of only having 5 playable characters with very specific roles. You have a tank that can stand through waves of enemy attacks while dishing out plenty of his own, an archer that can hit from light years away and never miss a shot, a spearman that can set up attacks from unique angles while doing big damage, a jack-of-all-trades knight, and then you get Sarah. The only thing she's got going for her is high evasion and move stat. Otherwise she's brittle and hits like a wet napkin. I found myself mostly putting her on cleanup duty. The game takes some unique stances on what a strategy game should be. You would think that having so few playable characters would take away from the experience, but I think everything was balanced around this surprisingly well. Your characters can attack and move multiple times provided they have the resources. To give an example, say your character moved 3 squares and attacked an enemy with an ability that costs 6 action points. Afterwards, you would be able to move the remaining squares, and if you have enough points, you can choose to act again. This simple design choice allows for greater player expression. Aggressive playstyles can be rewarded for risk-taking, with it being extremely satisfying to take a chance and have it pay off. I usually find myself more the defensive type of player when it comes to strategy games, and in my honest opinion, that's well balanced here too. When you end a character's turn, if you choose not to defend or can't, they'll perform a counterattack. Defending halves all incoming damage but leaves you unable to counterattack. I think this creates a neat balance of needing to know when and how to defend, because sometimes playing overly defensive can leave you with little resources and overrun with enemies. As battles go on, your units gain temporary extra action points for more actions, at least as long as they're participating in combat, which defending does count. Admittedly, the enemy variety is lacking, with there only being 18 different types, but I will say that they are designed extremely well, with very unique quirks that you have to take into account when dealing with them. Some enemies can knock you back, some enemies can pull you forward, some enemies can teleport ignoring all terrain, and all sorts of wacky stuff. You very much have to think about your approach to dealing with enemies, making combat almost puzzle-like. To neatly tie this combat ecosystem down, all of the weapons have durability. Weapon durability is taken into account when performing follow-up attacks, adding an extra layer of thought to the process, so I greatly welcome it. The only thing I didn't enjoy about combat is the fact that collectibles and treasure are scattered around the battlefield, with some of them being very much out of the way. Unfortunately, the value these items add to your run is immense, so I begrudgingly recommend you pick them up. On a positive note, you can use collectibles to create chokeholds, which is really funny. As characters level up, they learn new abilities and skill points to increase said ability's strength. This further opens up player expression, with there being a wide variety of options to cater to an even wider variety of playstyles. You can put your points into so many different options, I doubt any two players would have the same build. Once you're done tinkering around with the skill points, you can also equip characters with accessories that you find in battle. All of them have unique effects, so just see what best suits your needs. In the shop, you can upgrade and repair weapons. If the weapon isn't unique or upgraded, I would advise against repairing it because the repair cost is usually more than just buying a new one. Aside from visiting the archives, the only other thing you can do in between chapters is skirmish to try and farm resources. I say try because you're still using up your weapon's durability if you choose to participate in a skirmish. At some point, I became very intrigued as to why this game felt so intricately balanced, so I went to look at the credits and was blown away to find out this game was designed by Masayuki Horikawa. If you don't know who he is, this man is my father. I'm kidding. He's played a pivotal role in the Fire Emblem series since Thracia 776, most notably to me, however, for being the director of my favorite Fire Emblem game, Path of Radiance. When I learned this, everything began to click. The reason this game made me feel oddly at home? Papa Horikawa. The reason why every aspect of Redemption Reapers felt like it was balanced by an entity existing only to balance? Papa Horikawa. The reason this game initially launched at $49.99? Papa Horikawa. You see, Mr. Horikawa is used to that Fire Emblem money, which means old indie company AdGlobe's gotta shell out the big bucks. Along with that, AdGlobe made the decision of hiring Rei Kondo, composer of the Fire Emblem Three Houses soundtrack, and many others. All of this explains why the game sounds and feels like a Fire Emblem game. It's because it is a Fire Emblem game, and it's actually good. You can tell the freedom to direct was taken to the extreme here. As the game opens up, battles evolve from a slow crawl to sophisticated engagements with an ebb and flow that you have to follow in order to prevail. At some point, your archer learns to heal, and that's around when the enemies straight up start running towards you rather than waiting for you to slowly approach them and methodically tear them down. The game can be ruthless, often sending in well-placed enemy reinforcements meant to overwhelm either for sheer amount of damage or punish players for poor positioning/decision making. Thankfully, the reinforcements aren't ambush spawns, which means you're at least given a chance to figure things out. To leave this section off on a positive note, I will say that the combat is well made. If you don't play games for the story, Redemption Reapers is at least worth checking out for the combat. You just have to give it time to blossom. As for the story of Redemption Reapers, it's described as a dark medieval fantasy that follows a group known as the Ashenhawk Brigade, a pocket resistance of a war-torn country that was invaded by the relentless enemy forces known as Mort. Their very first in-game cutscene shows the Mort as being extremely ruthless. There is no remorse. They slay their foe, young or old, guilty or innocent, it does not matter. Within this cutscene, we can see that some of the character models are extremely stiff. This made for a good laugh seeing the Mort have a killing montage, but it's all stiff. I swear I can hear this one go, "Kya!" when he grabs the woman by the shoulder and stabs her through the back. Why did he do all that? To be honest, the stiff cutscene models are bad, especially for $50. Most of the story can be summed up to our group needing to go to an area and defeat some Mort to try to save some survivors. Usually, everyone is dead by the time the Reapers arrive, which always leaves them with a bitter taste of failure even when they succeed at clearing out the Mort. On one of their mini outings, they actually managed to save a single survivor, a boy named Naki. They return with Naki to the Hawk's Nest and report back to their leader, Rowan. Commander Rowan informs the Hawks that the neighboring country Luden has come to fight the Mort, but are in need of aid from the Hawks because efforts aren't going well. The Hawks are dispatched on mini missions, with their goal usually being to take out a Mort commander and throw a wrench in their plans to give the Luden forces an opening. Now I'm gonna give a quick spoiler warning, feel free to skip to this timestamp if you want to avoid spoilers. Things eventually come to a climax while when away on a mission, the Hawk's Nest is attacked by the Mort, showing them to be very cunning in the ways of war. They waited for everyone to be away, including Rowan, to launch a surprise attack on the defenseless refugees. The group returns to a massacre, but are at least able to protect Naki and a few other survivors. Rowan takes the main Mort commander head on in a badass ring of fire, where he goes Ultra Instinct and starts dodging every attack in order to buy the Hawks time to escape. The Hawks make it out, but not before witnessing their commander give his last in a blaze of glory. His final instructions were for them to make their way to a harbor and travel by boat to Fort Lorica. It's the final refugee stronghold left in the region, and even it will soon fall. Over time, the Hawks make their way there where they meet General Levante, leader of the fort. He welcomes the Hawks but is quick to let them know that the fort is in dire straits, surrounded by Mort preparing to siege them. Thankfully, the Luden army is planning a rescue mission, but the people of the fort will have to travel to an extraction point. The Hawks offer to buy time for the people of Fort Lorica to escape. The plan is for an emissary of Luden by the name of Lorthos to send a messenger hawk once everyone has safely arrived. If the message isn't received in 3 days, the Hawks are to assume the worst and escape. All of this leads into probably one of the best survival maps I've played in strategy RPG history. When the victory conditions showed up on screen saying survive, I became giddy with excitement. The game just gets really vicious here, sending the worst enemy types after you in multiples. There's also a collectible that's a bit out of the way that I actually managed to get before the map ended. I'm not gonna tell you how many turns you have to survive, but just know you're in for a really good time with this one. Looking back, the map actually took roughly about 2 hours for me to complete, which is insane, but I do play slow and steady. The even crazier part is, I was still hungry for more. Like, I didn't feel burned out after that. In fact, I felt really good. Sadly, this high is brought down by the mediocre final battle that follows. It's not that it's easy, it's just the game had thrown enough at me that I was literally able to predict where the final Mort commander would spawn, without ever having played the final battle. He still killed me, but that was because I didn't know there would be a second phase. Old Papa Horikawa giving us one last middle finger before the game is over. After beating the final battle on the second try, I was met with a cutscene of the Ashen Hawks making their final stand. This cutscene of them going full-on power fantasy cutting down the Mort is satisfying because it greatly represents how it feels when you get into the flow and carve your way through a battle. Unfortunately, by the end, everyone but Sarah is slain, and this is marked by the untimely arrival of the Messenger Hawk. A bitter end to a bitter tale. Truth be told, the story isn't always engaging, but some of its characters definitely are. Up until now, I've avoided talking about the main characters aside from Sarah, plainly because they all die in the end. But I want to take some time to do that now. To harken back to the reviews, they claimed that the characters lacked any originality and looked very dull. To be generous, I will say that the character designs are at least extremely inspired. Urs reminds me of Kratos, Luff has that Bloodborne Yharnam Hunter drip going on, Glenn looks like a traditional Lord of the Rings character, I haven't quite put my finger on Karin, but I know Sarah is meant to look like your classic Fire Emblem Lordling, to draw that crowd in. Considering the dark gritty nature of the game, I didn't exactly expect characters to pop, so the designs are serviceable. As far as I know, this was the studio's first time with 3D, so perhaps that played some hand in the character designs. Speaking of character designs, I really enjoyed Luff's character. He initially comes off as an asshole that loves to kill Mort. He's always nipping at his allies and causing fights, but in truth he cares the most out of everyone. I understand how one could perceive him as always upsetting his allies and challenging their ideas as a bad thing, but it's not. He keeps everyone sharp and on their toes. The world from their perspective is overrun with extremely hostile enemies that can be upon them at any moment. Anyone can die at any moment, so there's no time for comfort. He somehow manages to come off as the least and most caring person of the group. We know all of this not because the game tells us, but because it shows us. In fact, the game actually does an amazing job at showing you rather than telling. You know Luff cares about his allies because 9 times out of 10, he's in front of the formation. His ability Martyr reduces an adjacent ally's damage received by half, but opens himself up to attacks. His ultimate ability even heals everyone. You can tell this guy really cares about his friends. I find him funny, relatable, and a surprisingly well-written character. A breath of fresh air, if you will.
Do you have any regrets, Luff?
I regret everything I've done with my worthless life. Didn't mean to let that slip.
Overall, I enjoyed the group's dynamic. Here's a cutscene that pretty much perfectly sums it up.
Hey, Glenn. What is it?
That map you're holding there is practically falling apart. How old is it, anyway?
Who could say? But from the state it's in, I would guess several decades at least.
And you're willing to trust all our lives to something that dated?
While that's not the most encouraging news, I trust you to get us through this, Glenn.
Thank you, Sarah.
Are you kidding? We've already got our hands full just trying to fight these beasts in such close quarters.
We're never getting out of here, are we?
Worry not, everyone. I have no intention of relying on a single old map to see us through these crumbling tunnels. Everything will be fine. I swear it.
And we should believe you. Why, exactly?
Because places like this are always laid out more or less the same, and I know my way around them.
Oh, that's right. You were once a knight in shining armor. Captain of the Order, if memory serves? Been so long I'd nearly forgotten. Why, I bet you could handle this mission with one hand lopped off at the wrist.
Stop it, Luff.
Why? It's all true. Hell, Glenn should be proud.
The game is fully voiced, which I'm sure also plays a part in the $50 price point. Coincidentally, some of the cast voice characters from other popular strategy games such as Triangle Strategy, Tactics Ogre Reborn, and even Unicorn Overlord. It's come full circle. We shall never escape these games. Redemption Reapers has dialogue options, but I'm not sure how much they actually change the story. For one of the dialogue options, you can choose to gaslight Karen into telling you about how her mom died when she was a kid. Well, I guess if you don't trust me, after all this time we've watched each other's backs,
That's not fair, and you know it.
Since I've beaten the game, there is evidence suggesting some sort of alternate ending, because apparently I missed 4 characters and 3 weapons, which shouldn't have been possible. I tried looking for information online, but due to the game's lack of popularity, I've had no luck. If anyone knows what I'm missing here, please tell me, because I'd really like to know. All of that aside, finally we can talk about the game's biggest strength: atmosphere. I've played games like Dark Souls and Bloodborne, and while the games can be fun to play for the challenge, what I really stick around for is the atmosphere. Just soaking in the game world can get me so immersed I forget about the outside world for a moment. Redemption Reapers does succeed at evoking similar feelings. Usually I don't care if I miss a few collectibles, but I felt compelled to find them all. The amount of world building and lore they add should not be ignored. They're really great at helping set the tone of the game if you take the time to stop and read them. In fact, please humor me while I read some parts I picked out from the first 3 collectibles so you understand how much they contribute to the narrative of the game. Sunny. Had a hot spell of late, so I took the village children on an excursion to the waterfall deep in the forest. Things nearly took an ill turn when a Chakmaya spread its wings and scared timid little Bori. Poor thing nearly ran off into the woods and got lost. Still, I can't blame him for being wary, for an abundance of caution is proof of wisdom. All of the children are so clever and full of life. It won't be easy choosing one to name as my successor. And one more thing. We came across the unpleasant sight of a mauled fawn on the way home. I thought a bear was to blame at first, but after looking at it further, it appears to have been tortured. Likely the work of some twisted hunter. I feel terrible the children had to see it. Cloudy. I heard something strange from one of the merchants. He says the residents of a nearby village claim to have spotted monsters lurking about. I normally don't pay any mind to such outlandish nonsense, but the man's tone was so engaging I found myself hanging on to every word. I was thinking it might make a fine nighttime story for the children, but changed my mind once he began to regale me with some of the truly gory details. I went into the forest this afternoon, and it looked like I was worried over nothing. That's one weight off my mind. I also didn't come across any animals, but that's hardly surprising seeing as I've never been much good at concealing my presence in the forest. Still, that full story must have affected me more than I knew, because it felt like there was something in the woods with me the entire time. I even thought I smelled blood on the wind. It was enough to chill me down to my bones. Perhaps some wicked spirit was hovering over my shoulder. It's true! The story is true. There's a monster in the woods, one I saw today with my own 2 eyes. I went straight to the villagers and screamed at them to pack what they could and run, but they all laughed and called me a senile old man who'd mistaken a fallen log for some sort of horrible creature. Deep down, I know they were worried. Worried I wasn't acting normal. Worried I'd gone mad. Gods forgive me, I almost hope I have. Was it really just my imagination? If so, what about the merchant's rumor? The missing animals? The fawn's corpse? It can't all be coincidence. What I saw in the forest today wasn't human, nor was it any manner of beast. It was a thing in search of blood, and the malice radiating from it was enough to stop my heart from beating. While I pray I'm wrong, we can't afford to assume I am. Right now, I need to get the villagers far away from here, and if we all share a hearty laugh at my expense one day in the future, then so be it. Forgive me, my dear Canaria. Like as not, my soul is bound for the underworld, so I won't be able to see you in death. Oh, but I failed them. I failed them all. By the time I even thought to run, our ends were already sealed. My only solace is that a handful of people listened to me and fled the village. They didn't want to, of course. They were all happy here. As was I. Even now, I don't want to believe this is really happening. I wish I'd never become the village chief. I wish I'd never come here. Forgive me. Forgive me. Forgive me. Gods above. I don't want to die. Even just reading this for the purpose of putting it on script has once again drawn me in. These relics are people's lives. They help shape the narrative of a slowly decaying war-ridden country, and from the perspective of the people, a slowly decaying war-ridden world. Because those first set of relics were so good, I chose to collect them all and deliberately not read any more outside of those first few. Once all is said and done here, I plan to read them all probably in one whole sitting. All of my reading will further be enhanced by the game's awesome soundtrack that really just helps capture the mood. As mentioned earlier, the soundtrack is composed by Rei Kondo. I'm familiar with his work, having played all the Fire Emblems he's composed for. The Three Houses dubstep aside, I think Redemption Reapers has to be some of his most unique work. The entire game is meant to feel bleak and dreary, and I think the soundtrack complements that really well. Let's listen to a little bit of one of my favorite tracks from the game. This shit goes crazy. This is probably one of my favorite tracks made by Mr. Kondo ever. In fact, I'm 100% sure he took shrooms before composing this one. The way the bagpipes sound is just so ominous, as if one is being called home to Valhalla. Then you have that nasty percussion coming in smacking on the rim of that drum. It's so fucking good, but then it continues to crescendo into these badass opera vocals. Like, man, he was really doing it. It's such a shame that along with this amazing game came an amazing soundtrack that not many will get the chance to appreciate. Some of the soundtrack is outright bone-chilling, sounding like something straight out of an alien chase scene. I'd love to hear a full-on horror track at this point. I know I'm repeating myself, but this game really just knocks atmosphere out of the park. It takes so many odd things into detail. For instance, throughout the game, the party is accompanied by a merchant up until the last few chapters. You can still go to the shop, you can still pay for the wares, but no one is there. The man had never said a word, but I feel like this is his way of doing what he can for the party, leaving behind all his wares. Of course, as honorable Reapers, we still pay for the wares and the repairs. I'm not sure who's doing them, but they are getting done. At the end of the day, as far as I can tell, most non-critics enjoyed Redemption Reapers. It really does feel like a case of critics needing to get good, at least regarding the difficulty. Even with that, Redemption Reapers does have its flaws. The game lacks some quality of life features that are paramount to the experience of strategy games in the current age. One huge one is that there's no way to speed up combat, meaning you have to watch every animation every single time. God, this is how I would walk when I was trying to anger my mom. Not only that, but there's also no auto-scroll for the text, meaning you can't easily eat a snack in between chapters. Makes for odd nostalgia, but bad reviewing. The company also still shot itself in the foot with that price tag, and unfortunately once you lose an audience, they're gone. The sad part is, after finishing Redemption Reapers, I could almost argue that the original price of $50 was fair. I say was because now, on Steam, you can get this game for $24.99, and if you're a whore for Nintendo Switch physical copies like myself, Root does occasionally sell the game for $24.99. That's how I got mine anyways. There's so much you're missing out on here, and if you consider yourself a veteran of strategy RPGs, or even just a huge Fire Emblem fan, you should play this game and beat it. That way we can find each other on small pockets of the internet and talk about this game as if we're in a cool underground club. Then we can attempt to peer pressure others into playing this game by making them feel left out. I promise, it'll be good fun. So concluding all of this, I want to know, what do you think of Redemption Reapers? Do you agree with the critics that this game is dog shit? Or are you on the base side of history like myself, seeing the light that is Redemption Reapers? Feel free to let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and until next time, later.